Tonight's big stories. Chinese ships are spotted in waters off the Lubang group of islands by Philippine and U.S. navies conducting an exercise. Should China's presence in the area be considered an incursion into Philippine territory? We'll ask that question to retired Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio.
With Panay Island's power problem now on its third day, the blackout takes its toll on residents and businesses. We'll be speaking with Iloilo Governor Arthur Defensor Jr. about its impact on their province.
And it's a brand new year, but the same old problem for consumers as rice prices go up again. Just how much of an increase should we expect? Stay tuned to find out.
Welcome to the show. I'm Gretchen Ho.
I'm Danny Laurel.
And I'm Sean Yao.
Well, straight off into our big story for tonight, the Philippine and U.S. Navy's joint drills off Cabra Island in Occidental Mindoro. Now, that was cut short with China conducting its own patrols in the disputed waters, with the Chinese side calling the U.S.-Philippine patrols provocative. China's two-day patrols began yesterday, coinciding with the maritime joint cooperative activity of American and the Philippine navies, led by the USS Carl Vinson. Now, during their activity, the U.S. and Philippine Navy spotted two Chinese warships shadowing them near their joint operations area. These are the Chinese destroyer 174 and the Chinese frigate 570. The Philippines immediately issued radio challenges against the Chinese vessels. The Chinese Navy responded to the first call, saying they are conducting lawful activities in their territorial waters. The Philippines then reminded them that they are in the country's exclusive economic zone, by which China no longer responded. But China's Foreign Ministry spokesman Wang Wenbin said that the exercises were, quote, detrimental to management and control of the maritime situation and related disputes. He urged the U.S. and the Philippines to stop what Beijing called irresponsible actions in the disputed waters.
Now, the question is, should China's presence in the waters off of Cabra Island be considered an incursion? Let's get some insights from retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio. He joins us now via Zoom. Good evening, attorney. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening to everyone.
All right. Well, what do you make of this? It happened in the vicinity of Cabra Island, which is very much a part of Mindoro, well inside the Philippine archipelago. By international law, are China's patrols illegal or can be considered as an incursion?
Well, according to our own Navy that made the radio address to the Chinese warships, that the Chinese warships were within Philippine EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone. So it's outside our territorial sea because Cabra Island is facing the South China Sea, and there's no other island of the Philippines between Cabra Island and the South China Sea. It alone faces the South China Sea without any other island blocking it. No? So our own Navy radioed the Chinese warships that they are within Philippine EEZ, Exclusive Economic Zone. That means the Chinese warships are outside our territorial waters, because the territorial waters is up to 12 nautical miles from our baseline along the coast. So clearly, both sides agree that the Chinese warships were beyond the territorial sea of the Philippines. Now, China claims the waters within the 9 now 10 dash line. And since the Chinese said that this is their territorial waters, that means the warships of China were within the 9 or 10 dash line. No? So that is the situation from those discussions, those radio messages from both groups. No? So first, the Chinese were within our EEZ, but within the 9 now called the 10 dash line.
But as per international law,
exclusive
attorney,
economic zone, there is freedom of navigation
Right.
for all states, no, for merchant vessels and warships. So the Chinese could claim that they had a right to be there because there's freedom of navigation. But they were wrong in saying that they had jurisdiction over those waters because that's our EEZ. Only the Philippines has jurisdiction over our EEZ, no?
So was it an incursion
China,
or
of
not?
course, under the 10-dash line claims everything within the 10-dash line as its national territory. That is why the Chinese radio stated that they are within the territorial waters of China, which is in line with their claim, although it's illegal and outrageous that the waters within the 10-dash line are its national territory.
So was it, or can we consider it, based on international law, as an incursion, given that there is freedom of navigation within the EEZ?
No, it's not an incursion because it was in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines where there's freedom of navigation and overflight. That's why our own Navy said that, we don't mind them. They are in the EEZ, there's freedom of navigation.
Attorney, kung
And,
sakasakali
They
dumaan
did not
yung
ask the Chinese vessels to leave.
Kung dumaan po yung
It's part of our EEZ where there's freedom of navigation.
Right.
kung napadaan po yung Chinese vessels, Chinese Navy vessels sa territorial sea natin, does that constitute as right of innocent passage? What do you make of that?
Well, there is the territorial sea is part of our territory. No? It's territory in the sea. But the only difference is that the territory in the sea is subject to innocent passage of foreign merchant and warships. And that means that they can pass, but they have to make an innocent passage. Innocent passage means they cannot loiter, they cannot do research, they cannot fish, they cannot conduct military drills. It has to be a straight passage and continuous. That's innocent passage. We follow international law, we follow UNCLOS, but in this case, it was not an innocent passage because they were not passing through our territorial sea.
Attorney, this is not the first time that the Chinese have or voiced their opinions against these joint patrols. What are the optics here? And give us an idea of were these patrols from the Chinese ships actually expected, given that this has not been the first time that we've done this?
Well, we should expect all foreign warships to pass through our EEZ because that's allowed under international law. There's freedom of navigation and overflight. We cannot complain because we also will be passing through the EEZ of other countries. But what we should object is that Chinese claim that this is part of their territorial waters because the radio message from the Chinese warship is that they had jurisdiction over the area because it's part of their territorial waters. That's not correct. And that has been debunked by the arbitral tribunal. In the arbitral award, the tribunal said we have a full EEZ in the West Philippine Sea. That's 200 nautical miles from our archipelagic baselines.
Sir, but the patrolling is not an issue. The fact that we're conducting, joint patrols, and then you've got China ships shadowing. Is this an issue?
Well, anybody can invoke the ruling because the ruling said we have an EEZ. And in fact, when the Americans and the Europeans, when the US, UK, France, and even Japan patrol in the West Philippine Sea, they invoke the ruling that is the EEZ of a coastal state, the Philippines, and there's freedom of navigation and overflight. China responds to that by saying, no, that's within the 10-dash line. That's our national territory. So those are different narratives. Of course, the narrative of the Americans comply with UNCLOS and with the arbitral award. And that is what we are supporting.
When we take a look at the definition of EEZ, it is based on archipelagic baselines, as you mentioned. Pagdating po sa Philippines, what constitutes as our archipelagic baseline?
Well, from the baselines, from the archipelagic baselines, you measure 12 nautical miles. That's the territorial sea. From the edge of the territorial sea, you measure 188 nautical miles, and that is our exclusive economic zone. Now, the exclusive economic zone is not our. We don't have sovereignty over our exclusive economic zone, but we have sovereign rights. Sovereign rights to exploit the natural resources.
Right. Attorney, just to follow up on that and just for the benefit of everybody who might be watching today. So within the archipelagic baselines, that will be considered Philippine territory, right?
The
And
archipelagic baselines.
that's the edge of our
is
territory.
Yun yung
Yeah.
red kanina.
Oo, yung border, kumbaga.
Oo.
The archipelagic baselines are the baselines from which you measure the 12 nautical mile territorial sea.
Ito po,
So,
ito nakikita natin.
No question.
Oo.
yeah.
Pula.
So from the baselines, you measure 12 nautical miles. Our territorial sea is up to the edge of the 12 nautical miles.
All right, attorney,
It's
what
not-
then happens if, for example, a foreign vessel does go beyond that red line within or inside our archipelagic baselines or inside their territory? Should they ask for permission if they just want to pass through? Or like you mentioned
If it is-
kanina,
yeah.
oo na,
If it
pwede
is
naman
an
pagdadaan
innocent
lang.
passage, if it is an innocent passage, the majority rule is that you don't have to ask permission. That is, we follow that. In the territorial sea, you can exercise innocent passage without getting the consent or without notifying the coastal state. That we follow that, and the majority of the coastal states follow that.
Sir,
But
despite-
China requires prior consent before you can exercise innocent passage in their territorial sea. That is why in the archipelagic baselines law that is being discussed in Congress now, I have suggested that we will put there a condition that foreign ships can exercise innocent passage to our territorial sea only if they allow us to do the same in their territorial sea. In other words, it must be reciprocal. They cannot just exercise innocent passage in our territorial sea without seeking our permission. But when we go to their territorial sea to exercise innocent passage, we are required to get their permission. That's not fair. There should be reciprocity.
Sir, but can you clarify? No, you mentioned this is primarily for trade issues, no, or travel. But what if these are military ships or patrol ships?
No, innocent passage is both for merchant vessels and for military vessels.
Military as well. Hindi kailangan ng permission.
Okay. I just like to clarify this also. Yung territorial sea, does that apply also to islands that the Philippines has taken over in the Spratlys? For example, medyo malayo siya, nasa EEZ siya, pero kung baga, meron na tayong settlement doon. Yung 12 nautical miles ba within those islands are considered territorial sea?
Yes, in the EEZ, in the exclusive economic zone, there may be islands that belong to other states, or there may be islands that belong to the coastal state. Now, those islands, if they are habitable, they are entitled to exclusive economic zones also, aside from territorial sea. But if they are not habitable and all the islands in the Spratlys are considered not habitable, they are entitled only to a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. So, in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, there are pockets of islands with territorial seas.
All right,
And
attorney.
right now, we are claiming most of these islands, but not all. Like, for example, we are not claiming Spratly Island itself in the Spratlys. That's outside the KIG lines.
All right, let's
So-
talk about strategy, no, attorney. As we know, as we changed administration, we have sort of been perceived as a, kumbaga, bumabaling tayo pabalik, no, sa United States. And these joint drills have gotten more elaborate, I would, for lack of a better word. We now have frigates, aircraft carriers, Navy ships involved, as well as the Chinese. They've also thrown in a couple of Navy frigates. What do we make of this? Is this part of a new strategy? How should we change our existing strategy of just filing not verbals, since it doesn't seem to be working? And what do you make of all this? The optics can be perceived as an escalation.
Well, the reason why there are more joint patrols by the U.S. and its allies in the South China Sea is because they cannot accept China's 9, now 10-dash line. China is saying all the waters within the 10-dash line is Chinese national territory. That has to be objected. So how do you object to that? The nations of the world can object to that by filing an official protest, a note verbal, or by going there and exercising freedom of navigation, which is the more tangible way of refuting, opposing the Chinese claim. That's why the U.S. and its allies sail in the West Philippine Sea and in the high seas of the South China Sea to rebut China's claim that the waters are China's national territory.
All right, but should we, should we expect that this can just keep on going, that we will assert freedom of navigation along with our allies, and then China will assert also what they believe is their, part of their right as part of their territory. And then how do we end this, or where will this go, or will the ante even go up higher at some point?
Well, we have to oppose that, because if you don't oppose it, you don't object, then you acquiesce. You give your implied consent, and you lose. That's why we always file a note verbal objecting, so that we are not considered to have impliedly consented. Now, where will it lead? Well, it will lead to an arbitration, which we have done, because the UN Charter says all maritime disputes, all territorial and maritime disputes must be settled by peaceful means, by negotiation, by mediation, and finally by arbitration. And that's what we did. We went for arbitration. Now, if there are new issues, we can go back to arbitration. We have to, because the UN Charter mandates peaceful settlement of disputes. You cannot go to war to settle a dispute. That's outlawed already.
The president has said there's a need for a new paradigm and to move the needle back. And he also called for us to be a little bit more cautious. Do you think the government is right here? And what new paradigm can you imagine with the current setup?
You have to look at that statement in the context of our need. Our most important need today is to get the gas in Reed Bank, because Malampaya is running out of gas. Without Malampaya and without getting the Reed Bank as a replacement, we will have 12 to 14 hours of daily brownouts in Luzon. That will devastate the economy. That will raise inflation through the roof. Prices will go up. There will be strikes. Factories will close. So it will be devastating to the economy. So
Yes, but having said that, Attorney, how do we
that's
get
why
to...
we have to get the gas. And the Malaysians and the Indonesians were able to get the gas despite objection by China.
Okay.
They sent their survey ship, drill ship, accompanied by their navy. At the same time, the U.S. and Australian warships were conducting naval drills in the same area, so the Chinese Coast Guard could not shove away the Malaysian drill ship and survey ship. So they were successful.
Wow.
The same thing happened with Indonesia. It's our turn now. We have to send our survey ship and drill ship to Reed Bank to start developing Reed Bank as a replacement for Malampaya. Otherwise, we won't have gas, and we have to import LNG, which is very expensive. Our power rates will go up by 50% at least.
So that's where we're headed.
Yes,
with
that's
all
why
these
that
drills.
paradigm shift should open the exploitation of Reed Bank, because that's the most important thing. Everything that's happening now is focused on that. The Chinese are putting pressure on us on Yungin Shoal and Scarborough Shoal to warn us not to go to Reed Bank.
All right, on that note, thank you so much for your time, for joining us tonight. Retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio.
Pausing for a quick break right after that. The massive power outage in Western Visayas prompted work and class suspensions in Iloilo this first week of 2024. We'll get some updates on the situation with Iloilo Governor Arthur Defensor Jr. when the big story returns. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
The region-wide power outage in Western Visayas has left residents and businesses suffering at the start of the year. Marian Enriquez with this report.
2024 did not have a bright start for many residents in Western Visayas after the massive power outage that hit Panay Island and parts of Negros. The power outage is being attributed to the unplanned shutdown of several power plants in Panay, which isolated the island from the rest of the Visayas grid. As a result, work and classes had to be suspended in cities like Iloilo earlier this week. In the days that followed, residents were seen sharing what limited power resources they have to charge mobile devices and keep communication lines open.
Total blackout kasi ma'am eh. Libre po yung wifi para at least makontak nila yung mga kamag-anak nila na nasa sa ibang barangay na kung ano nangyayari para hindi rin mahirap sa kanila na mag-load pa.
It's the same situation in other parts of Iloilo and Western Visayas, with establishments trying to be business as usual despite the lack of electricity. The power interruption is seen to cost around 400 to 500 million pesos in business losses per day in Iloilo. Iloilo City Mayor Jerry Treñas did not mince words as he called on government agencies to act fast, particularly the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, or NGCP.
They were not even giving us updates until the OE ordered them to give updates. Talagang feeling entitled.
Your message to NGCP, sir?
You're a lot of shit. I am asking the Department of Energy, the ERC, and the Office of the President to use whatever remedial powers they have under their mandate to compel NGCP to make the necessary improvements. Otherwise, this will happen after 2 months, happen after a month, and this will be continuous already for Iloilo City.
The NGCP has since explained that they have no control over the power plants that tripped, but they said they are working with the DOE and the Energy Regulatory Commission to restore power as soon as possible. As of this afternoon, the grid regulators said they are waiting for one remaining power plant to transmit 135 megawatts, which will stabilize the grid. The agency adds that load restoration will be done conservatively to prevent voltage failure. The NGCP said that they are ready to transmit once the power supply is made available.
Inaantay talaga namin yung report ng mga power plants, especially the biggest one of the three that went on unplanned or emergency shutdown. Pero wala pang silang naibibigay na para mapagbangga namin yung data nila dun sa data namin so we can paint a clearer picture of what really happened in January 2.
The region-wide power outage has prompted several senators to issue resolutions seeking to investigate the incident. For its part, the NGCP said it's willing to face inquiry from the Senate. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
To give us a better sense of the impact of the power outage, we have with us on the line Iloilo Governor Arthur Defensor Jr. Good evening, Governor.
Good evening, Gretch and Danny and Sean.
Governor, can you tell us or give us an image of the situation on the ground? How are the residents and how much power has been restored?
Sa ngayon, may mga brownouts pa tayo. In fact, in Iloilo City right now where we are, brownout ngayon dito. Ganun din sa province of Iloilo. Ngayon, ang status natin as of 7 p.m., meron tayong 249.5 megawatts sa grid. And according to the NGCP, 300 megawatts to stabilize. So may kulang pa. And according to the advisory of NGCP, we are awaiting for Panay Conception Power Corporation to synchronize with the grid para makapagpasok na rin sila ng kuryente to fully restore the power in the whole of Panay. So that is our status right now. We are awaiting for that.
Alright, Governor, marami kasing players dito, Nandyan yung grid, nandyan yung distributor, at nandyan yung mga producers. is this a shared responsibility? Kung magtuturo tayo, no, sino po ba ang salarin dito? Ang sasabihin ng grid ay yung generation daw ang issue, which is the power plants. Some are pointing towards a distributor. Have you gotten down to the bottom of it?
So kanina, humingi tayo emergency meeting together with the Department of Energy, the NGCP, and the rest of the power sector together with the concerned local chief executives, number one. Kaya tama, to know kung ano talaga ang problema, kung ano ang cause, to address the problem. At para balikan yung mga directives ng Department of Energy ng 2023, no? Kasi noong April 27 and 28, 2023, nangyari ito. The same problems. And during that time, may mga direktiba ang Department of Energy, the NGCP, and the other stakeholders, no? Na kung magagawa yun, hindi na dapat mauulit yung problema. No? So, kanina, no, as we have gathered from the discussion, no, again, I am using it in practical and layman's terms, no? As we have gathered it from the discussion, na ang ating grid kasi, no, grid, ay dapat balansyado yun, no? May integrity kasi ang grid natin, may balance na dapat yung voltahe nun ay tama. No? So much so, na kung sobra ang voltahe o kumulang, you create an imbalance or a disturbance that causes a trip or activates the defenses of the generators. No? Kasi may mga protection mechanism yan sila na kung may disturbance sa grid, mag-activate yun para maproteksyonan nila yung sistema nila. So ang nangyari, we've gathered again from the meeting noong January 2, no? May nag-trip sa Philippine Energy Development Corporation Unit 1 facility. No? Ang trip yun ay internal. Ibig sabihin may problema sa makina na na-detect ng kanilang protection system, nag-trip, na-activate ang depensa, may temporary shortage sa temporary stoppage of power. So, nabawasan ang voltahe na pinapasok nila sa grid. No? So, that supposedly alleged that created a disturbance in the grid na hindi na-address ng tama.
Okay.
Kaya nagkaroon ng chain reaction.
So Gov, hindi naman to po, this is an unprecedented event. Hindi naman siya parating ganito. And are they assuring you na hindi po mangyayari ulit?
No, nobody gives assurance na hindi mangyayari ulit. Sana nangyari ito ng 1827 and 2023. No? Nagtitrip naman talaga ang ating mga planta. Yung pwedeng dahilan yan, internal, kung may problema yung mga machines, o kaya may disturbance sa grid. Yan, that is external. So,
bagamat nga na hindi natin, no, minsan ma-expect na bigla na lang papali yung planta, no, ano po yung action plan ngayon moving forward? Ang dami rin kasing hindi nagyari, di ba? Yung ipagkakabit yung grid ng Luzon sa Visayas, hindi rin po pa natutuloy. Anong sabi ng ERC? Kasi dapat meron tayong plan, di ba? Kahit na pumalya to, dapat may action plan. So, why were these things, anong sabi nila sa'yo? Bakit daw hindi nasunod?
Well, ang regulator talaga natin is Department of Energy, no? And of course, the ERC. Ngayon, balikan natin yung direktiba ng 2023. No? Umpisa tayo, anong sabi ka ng Department of Energy? That the NGCP should improve its protocols. No? Kasi according to the directive of the DOE in 2023, that the NGCP should synchronize the protection relays, mga protocol niyan sa grid ng generation, transmission, and distribution to protect the system. Kasi kung tama yung mga protocols natin, you protect the balance in the grid. Hindi mag-trip yung mga planta natin. Sinasabi kayo ng Secretary Dotilla, you should improve the protocols so that the integrity and the balance in the gate will be protected. No? Kasi kung halimbawa may tumigil na planta, may kukulang na may disturbance sa voltahe. No? Isa pa, balikan natin yung isang direktiba ng 2023 kasi ang Cebu, Negros, Panay, Phase 3, ang Phase 3 ng Cebu, Negros, Panay, backbone ay hindi pa tapos. No? Kung hindi pa tapos, ay hindi pwede walang dadaanan ang kuryente sa ibang islands. Halimbawa, kung may kulang na voltahe dahil may tumigil na planta, hindi pwede manggaling sa ibang islands para punuin ang kulang to maintain the balance. So anong commitment last year? Ang commitment ng NGCP na dapat August of 2023 tapos na. Pero kanina sa meeting, ang sabi sa atin na March of 2024 matatapos na Phase 3 ng CNP o the Cebu, Negros, Panay. So yun ang mga practical na solusyon. Una, we should improve the protocols, the protection relays to protect the integrity of the grid. Tapusin ang backbone para na may dadaanan ng kuryente kung kailangan natin ng kuryente galing sa ibang islands dito sa Visayas. So yan ang mga practical na solusyon kanina na pinag-usapan doon.
Governor, sa ngayon, how are people coping? How are you coping with the power interruption? Nabanggit na po ba sa inyo kung kailan mare-restore? At sa ngayon, wala po bang pasok sa work at sa school? Gaano katagal po titiisin bago maibalik?
Ang commitment natin based on the advisory of the NGCP, sabi ko nga kanina, we are awaiting that the PC plant will synchronize, no? Para makapagpasok na sila ng kuryente sa grid, makumpleto na ang requirement na 300 megawatts para ma-stabilize ang grid so that we can restore normal power. No? Dapat ngayong gabi yan, no? And we are expecting na bukas magno-normalize tayo. That is based on the advisory. Ang practical na effective atin, dito sa city, may suspension of classes. Sa ibang bayan sa probinsya, may mga suspension of classes rin tayo, pero hindi lahat. Sa mga bayan-bayanan natin, iba-iba ang experience na doon sa brownout.
So, yung experience niyo po dyan, pareho rin po sa Guimaras? Tsaka may iba pang areas na apektado sa inyong kaalaman po? Oo. Yung scope po?
Yung Panay. No? Yung Panay at ang Guimaras. Dahil may yan ang mga local government sa group natin.
Alright, Governor, isang follow-up lang po, no? Yung nabanggit nyo nga, yung Cebu, Panay at Negros interconnectivity, yung Phase 3 na i-deliver dapat ng NGCP. Ang sabi kasi nila, March daw yun matatapos. Now, sinabi nila yun before this whole outage happened. Natanong nyo po ba sa kanila kung on track matapos ng March yung proyekto?
Supposed to be. Na? So, kung tuloy-tuloy yan, sa March matatapos na tayo. Pero hindi yun, that deadline has been extended for six times already according to the Secretary of Energy. But anyway, March is near. We're hoping na matatapos na yan. Para yung main line natin, nagdadaanan ng kuryente talaga ay matatapos na. That will help stabilize power here in the Panay.
Gov, yung festivals po, yung Kasadyahan and Dinagyang, paano po yun? Do you have contingency plans?
Yes, in the provincial capital, we have backup. At yung mga establishment natin, may backup na. No, kahapon, we put the province in crisis mode. We are on blue alert. And we ensured na yung mga vital facilities natin tulad ng hospital ay may backup power.
Sa yung Dinagyang,
Dinagyang
so buti sa
festival.
dulo pa ng January. So,
Correct.
meron pang time.
Hopefully,
Oras. But we do hope that power will be back by tonight. Yan po, yung nabanggit ninyo, so that life can go on for you tomorrow. Thank you so much for joining us, Iloilo Governor Arthur Defensor Jr.
Ay nako, talaga naman, di ba? 4 na araw pa lang ng 2024.
Thursday pa lang.
Daming bad news agad for consumers. At ito, dadagdagan ko pa. Rice prices are reportedly set for another increase. Consumers can expect rice prices to go up by 2 pesos per kilo. According to SINAG, the rising prices are due to limited supply, especially since harvest season is already done. And because of this, the price of well-milled rice may reportedly range between 54 to 56 pesos per kilo. Currently, several markets have already implemented the higher prices. And to make matters worse, SINAG says more price hikes could soon follow.
May konting ani na naiwan ngayon, pero siyempre yung price mas mataas yung pagbili. So agawan yung local na palay na binibili ngayon. Ang tingin natin by February, tataas pa ng konti. We hope na hindi umabot ng 60 pesos yung delivered price.
How much can we expect rice prices to increase this 2024? Let's bring in Shaila Francisco for the details. Shaila, go ahead.
Gretchen, according to SINAG, they expect rice prices to decrease towards the end of March when harvest season begins. The Agriculture Department shares the same outlook.
We cannot expect na talagang bababa ng mababa yung presyo. Ngayon, ina-expect natin we're going into lean season mid-January hanggang mid-February. Waiting tayo ng harvest natin ng March, April. Pagdating uli ng harvest natin ng dry season, dyan, dahil marami na uling palay, naturally bababa yung farm gate.
The allocated budget of 30.8 billion pesos for the National Rice Program in 2024 is said to be a significant help. This aims to ensure that the harvest of palay in March will not be adversely affected by the El Nino phenomenon. Gretchen, should rice prices continue to increase, the DE says it is ready to implement a suggested retail price or SRP. However, they will consult with the farmers and stakeholders first to determine an appropriate price before enforcing it. Gretchen?
All right, thanks so much for that, Shaila Francisco.
Okay, alam mo naman, optimist ako. So pag binigyan ko yun ng bad news, susundan ko yan ng konting good news. This time from the health front, the health department says that the number of COVID-19 cases has gone down during the holidays. After Christmas until New Year, COVID cases decreased by 10% from the previous week. The DOH also mentioned that only 1% of those cases were critical. Now, from November until December, the average utilization of ICU beds by COVID patients was only at 12%. And according to Octa Research Group, the positivity rate in Metro Manila has gone down to 19.9% on January 2, compared to almost 25% the previous week. And as fortunate as we are with the COVID-19 situation, it seems like the United States is looking to enforce stricter measures. This is after hospitals in at least 4 U.S. states have reinstated mask mandates amid a rise in cases of COVID, seasonal flu, and other respiratory illness. These states are in New York, California, Illinois, and Massachusetts. The latest weekly information provided by the CDC, or Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, indicated that there were more than 29,000 COVID-related hospitalizations in the United States from December 17 to 23. Along with that, the CDC also recorded over 14,700 hospitalizations from the flu.
So these 3 major winter respiratory viruses, flu, COVID, and RSV, are out there spreading, making people sick. We should not underestimate them. So here and there, hospitals are asking people, visitors, as well as their healthcare staff, to put back their masks in order to protect their patients as well as each other from these viral infections. So in addition to vaccine, the masks do provide an additional layer of protection.
Pausing once again right after that. Officials of the National Telecommunications Commission are being requested to inhibit themselves from the case regarding their suspension order against SMNI. The details of that when the big story returns. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
Here are some updates on SMNI's franchise violation case. The network is asking 3 officials of the National Telecommunications Commission, or the NTC, to inhibit from the case. The NTC has begun its hearing on the 30-day suspension order against SMNI. There, SMNI filed a motion to inhibit against 3 officials of the commission. These are Commissioner Ella Blanca Lopez and Deputy Commissioners John Paulo Salvajan and Alvin Bernardo Blanco. SMNI's legal counsel said the 3 officials should inhibit, noting that they are serving as both the complainants and the judges for the case. Documents show that it was the NTC itself that filed the 30-day show cause order against SMNI. SMNI argued that this is a violation of due process, and they said they cannot expect an impartial judgment considering the, quote, dual function of the commission.
We cannot expect justice from the NTC in this case. The NTC is the judge, the NTC is the complainant, the NTC is the executioner. We cannot expect justice from the NTC. May hustisya ba kami dito? Di ba? Parang judge yan na nag-file ng kaso at ang kaso nasa korte niya.
Aside from filing the motion to inhibit, SMNI's lawyers also questioned why it was not the 3 NTC officials who handled today's hearing. Brian Basa has the details on that. Brian?
Hi, Gretchen. SMNI's legal counsels are questioning why it was a hearing officer who presided over today's hearing, while the 3 officials who signed the show cause order were absent. The lawyers said in their own words, kung sino pa raw ang importanteng dapat nasa pagdinig, sila pa ang wala.
Ang public interest ito mataas, dapat silang 3 ang nag-hear dito. So, diniligate nila yun sa hearing officer. So, kinwestiyon namin, ano bang authority ng hearing officer para mag-conduct ng hearing instead of the commissioner and her 2 deputies.
SMNI is hoping that the NTC will immediately issue a resolution on their motion for the 3 officials to inhibit. Before this, the network had accused the commission of being influenced by House lawmakers. As you know, the NTC filed its show cause order against SMNI in response to a House resolution that calls for such action, citing the network's supposed franchise violations. SMNI had also earlier filed a restraining order before the Court of Appeals against NTC suspension order. News 5 is currently trying to get the side of the NTC on the matter, but they have yet to respond. Back to you.
Thank you so much for that, Brian Basa.
Right, moving on now to other news. Solid as a rock. And that's exactly how Senator Bato de la Rosa described the commitment from President Bongbong Marcos that investigators from the International Criminal Court will not be allowed to enter the country.
Solid as a rock yung assurance na binigay sa akin ng Pangulo nung kami nag-dinner doon sa Malacanang. Solid as a rock. Naniniwala ko sa Pangulo, yung buo yung tiwala ko sa kanya sa sinabi niya sa akin about ICC. Until now, buong-buo pa rin yung aking paniniwala sa kanya na hindi niya papapasokin yung ICC.
De la Rosa said President Marcos gave this assurance last November. De la Rosa, who served as PNP chief under the Duterte government's war on drugs, was named in the investigation documents submitted to the ICC. Nevertheless, the former police chief turned senator urged authorities to verify whether there are ICC investigators already in the country. And if so, Senator De La Rosa would seek their deportation if the government did not authorize their entry.
Hindi inauthorize ng gobyerno natin yung pagpasok nila dito at paggagawa ng investigation. Hindi sila inauthorize ng gobyerno natin, then andito sila nag-conduct ng investigation, para na tayong mga tao na yan. Dapat they should be declared as undesirable aliens by the Bureau of Immigration at once, right away. I-declare sila.
Meanwhile, the Office of the Solicitor General was not able to confirm the alleged presence of ICC members in the Philippines. Soljan Menardo Guevara pointed out, though, that ICC investigations can be done without setting foot in the country. He also maintained that the Philippines has no legal duty to cooperate with the ICC's drug war probe.
And we're getting closer and closer to Traslacion 2024, where millions of Filipino devotees are expected to flock to Quiapo Church. Kamusta naman kaya ang preparations? Let's bring in JC Cosico for the details. JC, what do you have for us?
The final Novena Mass here at the Quiapo Church has just finished earlier today. A procession of the replicas of the Black Nazarene was held days before its actual feast on January 9, where millions are expected to participate. Since this morning, the stretch of Carriedo Street near Quiapo Church in Manila has been filled with images of the Black Nazarene. That's because it's the final day of the replica blessing and procession. The activity was conducted so they wouldn't have to bring their images on the actual feast day, especially with the expected participation of 2 million devotees in the upcoming Traslacion.
Lahat po ng elemento ng nakagisna nating prosesyon ay mangyayari po. Ito po yung nakagisna na nating paghila ng lubid, may pasanan, may pagsalya, may pagpahid ng panyo o tuwalya, at may krus na mahahawakan sa likod ng andas.
To ensure a smooth procession, devotees are prohibited from boarding the actual carriage, which will be guarded by the Hijos del Nazareno. The police have also prepared for the possibility of a stampede.
Karoon kami ng mga simulation exercises para i-address po ito mga contingencies na ito. Kung susundin po sana lahat yung mga guidelines, marireduce pa natin yung possibility na magkaroon po ng stampede.
They also showed the design of the carriage, where the Black Nazarene is enclosed in a glass box. The Quiapo Church leadership assured the glass enclosing the Black Nazarene on the carriage is not easily breakable as it is made of tempered glass.
Makapal na po ito. Kung talaga ho ito ay may sasadya na bumato o kaya ho may humataw ng bakal, dun ho lang ito masisira at mababasag. Pero gayon pa man, hindi ho mababasag ng tuluyan at maghihiwa-hiwalay ang salamin.
In the same route as in 2020 before the pandemic, the procession will pass from Carino Grandstand back to Quiapo Church. The MMDA has since conducted a clearing operation along the route of the Traslacion. Apart from wearing face masks, social distancing measures will also be implemented inside and outside the church.
Medyo tumataas po ang bilang ng mga nagkaka-COVID ngayon. Although controlled naman po kahit dito sa lungsod ng Maynila.
LED walls will also be installed around Quiapo Church. There will also be a live stream available online for those who can't attend in person. Meanwhile, aside from the first aid stations managed by volunteer organizations, ambulances will also be deployed. They will also implement a gun ban, liquor ban, and firecracker ban. Moreover, a no-fly zone and no-sail zone will be enforced. The Malacanang has also declared January 9 as a special non-working day in Manila for the feast. Gretch, tomorrow is the first Friday of 2024. There will be hourly masses here at the Quiapo Church starting at 4 o'clock in the morning until 8 in the evening. Now on Saturday, January 6, the pahalik of the Black Nazarene will begin at the Carino Grandstand, where devotees will only be allowed to wipe the image by using a handkerchief or cloth. Back to you.
Thank you so much for that report, JC Cosico.
Right before we go, our big picture tonight is Francisco Motors' take on the modern jeepney. The Filipino manufacturer showcased their version of the e-jeepney, which costs 985,000 pesos. Much cheaper compared to other modern jeepney models ranging from 2 to 3 million pesos. Now, their version has an electronic door on the right side and a ramp for PWDs and senior citizens. They have also air-conditioned their units and installed CCTVs. Francisco Motors said that these units can be purchased through installment with a 50,000 peso down payment. Traditional jeepney drivers and operators who opted not to consolidate have been expressing concern over the cost of modernization, which they said will put them in huge debt.
Kayang-kaya naman pala ng Pilipino eh.
Saka natuwa ako because it also still looks like
exactly.
a jeepney.
Sabi nga namin yung pinapresent nila sa modern jeepney, mukha ng minibus.
Totoo, mga coaster, di ba? Or malaking van.
So hopefully, this is a good middle ground. Pero sabi naman ng DOTR, baseless daw sinasabi ng ilang groups na maaaring tumaas yung pamasahe to 50 pesos.
Okay.
So kasi kailangan para dumaan sa proseso. So usually pagka mag-i-increase yung fare,
Correct. May
naman
regulatory.
1 peso, 2 peso, 3 pesos.
Tsaka ano yan, no? Talagang magpe-petition ka pa. Kailangan mo
Yun,
i-prove na
dadaan ka
deserve
sa
mo yun.
ganon. Pero sinasabi naman ng mga drivers, kailangan namin bawiin dahil ang dami namin gastos. Bibili kami ng bagong unit, may garahe,
That's the
may
cheapest.
mekaniko, at lahat-lahat.
May interest pa
Yun.
for the loans.
Oo.
Ayun nga.
Ayun.
We'll see where this goes. At kung meron ngang bibili nitong modern jeepney,
I hope they can decorate
At least may
it still,
options
diba?
Mukha naman pwede kasi
Oo,
puting-puti
parang
lang
siyang
eh.
blank canvas eh.
Yes,
That
parang
can
sarap.
be... I'm glad the
May mga
tradition,
pangalan
I mean, the traditional
ilalagay.
jeepney is not lost there.
I am very happy about that.
Just like the traslasyon this coming
I
Monday.
know. Uy, ingat-ingat lang. Pero at least the good news is bumaba na yung COVID-19 cases. Kasi nakita mo yung siksikan ng tao.
Teka, nung Christmas holidays, andan kong kalala na may sakit.
Totoo.
Sabi ko nga, is it also a matter of people not testing? I mean, not
It could be.
submitting the results.
Or it's just the usual, salo-salo, getting together,
Pero I guess the good news
everybody
there
here.
is that wala masyadong hospitalization. Kaya,
Alright, so
safe
ingat-ingat
naman.
na lang, no? Come Monday.
Yes.
That's it for the show tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in and have a good night.